is development is at its core a relationship. And it's a relationship between a manager and employee. And that relationship plays out through conversation, not those one and dones, but the small moments, the small conversations, the checking in with people, the what did you learn about that? What do you want to learn next? What's this next project going to do for you in terms of your visibility? I mean, these small conversations that layer one on top of the other, that's development.
Welcome to the Love in Action Podcast, the show that explores all the ways you can evolve into the best version of yourself as a leader. I'm your host, executive coach, speaker, and author, Marcel Schwantes. I believe that when we show up with our full humanity to work and lead from a place of love and care and inclusion, it will make a radical difference in your leadership, your business, and your bottom line. This is a show about love as a leadership and business strategy. Let's do this.
Hey, welcome back. If you're a longtime listener, thanks for being part of this journey and this movement. And if you're a new listener, well, welcome as well for you. And we hope that this episode brings you extreme value. And I think I have a good feeling that it will because of the guest that we have. And we hope that you keep coming back as well. So few guests are repeat guests. And today's guest is not only back, she's a trifecta guest. Yep. It's her third go round on the Love in Action podcast. Her hat trick, if you're a hockey fan. And I'm so honored to bring back Julie Winkle Giulioni. She is the co-author of what many consider really to be an all-time classic. It's an international bestseller. That book is called Help Them Grow or Watch Them Go, Career Conversations Organizations Need and Employees Want. I'm gonna update that subtitle in a minute, but here is the book. If you're watching on YouTube right now, that book has been translated in several languages. I'm going to ask Julie how many exact languages, in fact. So the book has been expanded and updated in its third edition. So let me refresh the subtitle as well in the new edition. Career Conversations Organizations Need and Employees Still Want. And that's important. And we're going to get into what they actually still want in a few minutes when we dive into the book. Julie is also the author of Promotions Are So Yesterday, Redefine Career Development, Help Employees Thrive, where she features 7 alternatives to the traditional promotion and career development ladder. It's one of my favorite books. Julie is not only a best-selling author, she is a champion for workplace growth and development, and she helps executives and leaders optimize talent and potential within their own organizations. Julie is a sought-after keynote speaker. In fact, she was named by Inc. magazine as a top 100 leadership speaker. She is a proud mom, a wife, and she now joins us. Julie, welcome back to the Love in Action podcast.
Thank you so much, Marcel. I've so been looking forward to our hat trick.
Hat trick. I just came up with that. I thought, and I'm not even a hockey fan, but that's what they do when they score 3 goals. It's a big deal. And people throw the hats into the rink. So
third time's our charm.
I know. I should have thought about a prop, a hat to kind of throw at the screen at the camera. All right. So don't forget, folks, at the end of this episode, Julie and I are going to continue the conversation in the green room over in my implementer community at Substack. So that will be a private conversation where we're going to give subscribers of my implementer community specific tools, strategies, and actions that you can take to implement straight from Julie's toolbox. And you can see the link in the show notes if you'd like to join us there. All right, Julie, should we dive in?
Yes, let's.
Okay, I asked you this last time, but we have new listeners. So if people are not familiar with you, what's your story?
I am a geek around learning. I think at the end of the day, from my very first job teaching modeling and charm to children, I have just kind of grown up with my audiences. I taught high school. I was a university professor and department chair before going back into industry and dealing with real business issues that could be addressed through learning and development initiatives. And so today I work with organizations primarily looking for ways to engage their folks, to build better results, to enhance retention, because at the end of the day, it all starts with development and growth. And so I've had the good fortune to write a couple of books, to travel the world, and get to really work in this space that I continue to find fascinating around how we can help people learn and grow throughout their careers.
Yeah. And, this is such a fun question to ask because I don't get to ask it often because people don't have expanded editions up to a third, release like you just re-released it and updated it. But what has that journey been like throughout all these years? I'm just curious because this is your life's work.
Yeah, it kind of is, isn't it?
Yeah.
The first edition came out 12 years ago. And I remember when I was invited to co-author this book with Bev Kay, I thought, oh, this will be fun. This is kind of one of those, bucket list activities. How hard can it be? As you know yourself, there's a lot to it. But it was such a joyful process getting to take these years of experience and perspective and conversations and insights and put it together in a form that could scale, that could let other people improve the quality of their lives as leaders and the lives of their employees. And so that first edition was just a kick in the pants and totally changed my life in ways that I never expected. I mean, it literally went around the world talking about in Russia and China and Brazil, places I would never have gotten to go, to work with leaders to really explore what does development look like today and how can we make it more prominent, a part of our business landscape, despite the challenges and all the limitations that exist in business today. And so that first edition was wonderful. And every group I talked to, every keynote I did, every workshop I conducted, I was gleaning more and more, insights and thinking, oh gosh, why didn't I think to put that in the first edition? So in 2019, when the publisher came back to us and said, hey, it's time for an update, it was just like, oh, yay, I get, that do-over opportunity. So all of those nuggets and experiences got to be incorporated. And one big thing that I had found as, again, working with so many different organizations is it's certainly about the individual employee. It's certainly about the leader, but it's also about the system and the culture within which all of that operates. And so that second edition gave us an opportunity to speak to what are the cultural competencies, essentially, that are required to create an environment where growth can be really pervasive and organic. So that was really cool. And then it was last year when the publisher called and said, the book is still selling well, and, maybe it's time to update it. And I remember scratching my head and thinking, I think we just did that. This has got to be evergreen. There can't be anything going on differently. And then upon reflection, it did dawn on us that, a few things had changed over the last 5 years. Global pandemic, the Great Resignation.
Just a few things.
Yeah. So while career development has evolved a bit, it's really that context that has shifted tremendously. And so it gave us a chance to look at what does development and growth look like within the context of this very different marketplace. And so that's what this last edition really has given us a chance to do, is to update the context and help leaders operate this notion of career development within the time-starved, no resources, even AI, and technology-driven environment that we're in. And so it's been really, really fun to have this last opportunity to update it and to wrap some new tools around it, because today we're consuming content differently. So we've got a book bot that goes along with it, another way to use this content. And so to update the delivery mechanism as well as the content.
Yeah, just the fact that from the second edition to the third edition, I mean, think about it, Julie. The world literally changed overnight in 2020, which, and I can only imagine that learning and career development went with it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, some of the traditional ways went right out the window, but then people are like, how do we shift? How do we pivot to this new model of learning? And we'll get into the remote and the AI in a minute, but I just want to kind of just let the listeners just sort of give them a little small window of, okay, all right, this is an evolving conversation here, but I wanted to pull back a little bit because, you've probably coached and trained lots of people. I have as well. And sometimes managers and leaders are missing the mark on this important topic of career development. It's just not on their radar screen. Why do you think that is?
Well, I would say it's on their radar screen, but in a weird, isolated corner of the radar. So they know they're supposed to do this. I mean, and to be honest with you, most of the managers and leaders I talk to, I know that same's true for you, they would love to engage in these meaningful conversations. They really thrive when they're helping other people thrive. But the conditions around them seem to conspire to just squash that opportunity. And so the part of the radar screen where they've allowed development to live is over here in this annual conversation that HR tells me I have to have. And I schedule it and I take people aside and we fill out the form and we check the boxes. I hit submit. End of discussion until next year this time when we revisit it all again. So it's become this mechanical administrative task. And when managers have sorted it to that place in their brain, they've done it, they've checked it off. Okay, on to the next.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Exactly. Until we're prompted next year to do it. And so the opportunity really is to shift and move development so that it radiates throughout that radar screen. So it's appearing in and among and on all of those bips and bleeps, that exist there.
Yeah. Okay. So you've already mentioned one mistake that managers make, treating this as a kind of a one-time annual thing. And it's hard for me to believe that it's still happening. But yeah, traditional means of doing that have been around for decades. It's kind of hard to break out of the same old, right? I mean, sometimes we revert back to what's typical, what's comfortable, and change is hard for some organizations to evolve. All right. Are there any other common mistakes that managers might be making right now when it comes to career development?
Yeah, there are a couple of things, assumptions that lie under the surface that drive behavior that is not in the leader, nor the employee, nor the organization's best interest. One of the assumptions is I don't have time for this.
Yeah.
And of course, no one's going to argue. Managers are darn busy. So are employees, for that matter. But if we continue to think about development as an event, as a task, as a thing on our to-do list, then we won't ever have the time. So we need to shift our perspective around that. So the time objection or myth is really big. The other thing is a lot of leaders are feeling like it's a scarcity sort of approach to talent. Like, I've developed my people, they're my people, I don't want to go anywhere, I can't afford the disruption, so I'm going to hold really tight to talent. And of course, the tighter we hold to talent, the more dangerous that becomes. And one of the things we talk about in the new edition of the book is talent is an enterprise-wide resource. Mm-hmm. Leaders who think about it that way have the opportunity to support retention in the organization. Better to have somebody go down the hallway than down the highway. And so that's the other thing that we find a lot of leaders really struggling with is mine. which we know doesn't work so well.
Yeah. And taking the page straight out of servant leadership for me is that that's the case for actually the retention part is to keep them so they don't leave, is to pour into their development instead of, and this is such a mindset shift here, right? Like you said, scarcity, fearing losing the employee after you pump all the training and then the mentoring and all this stuff, and then they end up leaving you. Oh my gosh. But rather think about it like the more I pour into their development, the more they'll want to stay.
Exactly. And, the truth is not everyone is going to stay. So you are going to lose some people, but leaders who've gotten good at development are able to bring those new people up to speed quickly. They have a reputation for developing that means the best and the brightest are going to be, knocking on the door saying, pick me. So they've got more of a pipeline upon which to draw as well.
Yeah. So speaking of mindset, let's talk a little bit about maybe people listening that aren't really, this is still not part of their day-to-day. Like, what shift do they need to experience to just make career development just a part of their everyday work?
The key is to unburden ourselves as leaders when it comes to development. What I have found working in this space for the last couple of decades is development is at its core a relationship, and it's a relationship between a manager and employee. And that relationship plays out through conversation. Not those one and dones, but the small moments, the small conversations, the checking in with people, the what did you learn about that? What do you want to learn next? What's this next project going to do for you in terms of your visibility? I mean, these small conversations that layer one on top of the other, that's development. That's the stuff that's happening within the envelopes of time you're already spending with people. So it's not extra, it's not additive. And that's what's authentic. How a leader shows up with a real benevolence and a desire, a care for someone else and their growth. That is sustainable, doable development, even given all the constraints and the restrictions and the craziness that we face in today's workplace.
Yeah. So going back to the relationships, and this is really such a neat segue because can I quote you from the book? I don't know if this was you or Bev, but here's what you said. When it comes to a leader's role in developing employees, talk is actually the most precious and results-driving commodity you have to share as a manager.
It all comes down to conversation. And when leaders get that, when they finally realize this isn't a to-do, this is a to-be, this is how I show up. When they have questions, and the book has 100+ questions to ask. When I've got a question to ask, when I realize that all I have to bring to that conversation is curiosity, wow. I mean, like the pressure is off. I don't have to have the answers. All I have to do is hold the space for the conversation.
Yeah. Okay. So speaking of conversation, I'm a big fan of psychological safety, as I know you are as well. Talk a bit about the importance of psychological safety in career development conversations.
Yeah. And this was one point that we were able to weave into this new edition. I'm such a fan of Amy Edmondson and the work that she does in this space. And it's so vital because when you think about growth and development, it is really risky business. Putting myself out there, building new skills, trying new projects, enjoying new experiences. There's no assurance of success in any of that. And the extent to which people are going to be willing to put themselves out there, and we know that growth happens in the discomfort zone. So the extent to which people are going to dive headfirst into that discomfort zone is a reflection of the extent to which there's psychological safety. And so leaders who normalize mistakes, the leaders who establish that failure is not going to be fatal here, the leaders who serve as that safety net, that have folks back, they're the ones who see the people around them willing to risk, willing to grow, and able to thrive in the process. And so for leaders, one of the key ingredients of a core competency that really undergirds all of our relationships and results is that ability to create a safe space for people.
Yep, exactly. Okay, I want to shift to, here we go, 2020, the world everybody goes remote, and then you have the rise of remote work, and then that evolves into hybrid work environments. Well, how has that impacted career development? Now it's 2024. I know a lot of companies are going back to the office, but many are still working remotely and in hybrid.
Yeah. That was probably the most profound shift I've experienced in my career, which has been a few years, in terms of the dynamics of the workplace. Because for years, organizations said, we don't have the systems, we can't accommodate this. And then, until they did, and overnight we're able to. And it's been really fascinating to watch this dynamic, as the return to office continues to be an issue. There are still more people. We've got a critical mass of folks who are in remote or hybrid working circumstances. And what we've seen is that managers who were already in many cases struggling to develop people who were co-located, once they were scattered to the wind, that became even more complicated. So managers, leaders, throughout this transition, they've gotten pretty good at, like managing performance remotely, doing their team meetings remotely, using the various systems and tools. But what's really fallen behind is the ability to develop people who are co-located. And we're starting to see the unfortunate, unintended consequences of that around folks who are remote and hybrid, not enjoying the same kinds of development opportunities. There are some pay gap studies that would indicate that being co-located is better for your pocketbook. Promotions seem to come more easily and quickly to those who are co-located. So we're creating, a whole new diversity issue right here around this. And so we decided this was the most profound shift that we made in the new edition. We wanted to write a chapter to leaders about how do you crack this, developing in a distance code. And so we interviewed, 25 or so different writers, thinkers, practitioners who were doing this well, and looked forward to creating 18 new strategies that you can use. We didn't get 18 new strategies, but what we got was this common theme. What every single one of them said is, there's no magic bullet here, no silver bullet. What you need to do is everything you would do with people who are co-located, but do it with greater intention. It all comes down to intentionality.
Right.
And so that in that chapter, we offer some strategies that really bring that kind of deliberate, purposeful intention to interactions. Things like just starting one-on-ones with 5 minutes around development. Just starting with, what have you learned? What comes next? What are you working on? That in and of itself just totally changes the dynamic and communicates really powerfully the role that growth plays in the leader's life and should play in the employee's life.
Isn't that fascinating? I mentioned earlier, out of sight, out of mind, and this totally relates to not being able to see someone, face to face in an office environment under the same roof. You kind of tend to forget about them. And in that, I can see how that would transfer over to lack of development opportunities, lack of visibility, not just physically, but as well. Am I really part of the team? Because I haven't talked to my manager, or he has not popped up on my screen for 5 days, right? So I can see how that would, to bridge that gap, is you have to be more intentional. You have to be more focused and more committed to putting those practices into play every day, those opportunities to engage people, have those conversations. What are you interested in? Tell me, share what your career goals are, right? Do you have any idea like how the frequency or how often should managers have those conversations just to keep people on their radar screen?
Yeah, weekly check-ins for most leaders work well, even if they're short, just that, on the calendar, we're going to do this because this is important, can make a big difference. But, frequency, I might worry less about that and more about the equity piece of it.
Okay.
Because as you said, when we're all co-located, all sorts of stuff is just happening organically. And, pass someone in the hallway, we got this assignment. Would you be interested in that? The proximity bias is completely unintentional, but it's just, human nature. And so what leaders have to do is combat that. One of the tools that we suggest in that chapter is create a roster of your people and just make a check mark each time you connect with them. And pretty soon you're going to see, oh man, those people who are right here at corporate office are having a lot of check marks. And that gives you the opportunity to then even the playing field and be more intentional. But the other thing about remote workers is there is this whole invisible curriculum in an organization. The stuff that you pick up by osmosis, just by hanging out, just by watching the dynamics, by seeing, who sits next to who and where the notes are passed. And, all of that really quiet stuff that informs, especially young professionals, so much about the rules of the road. And all of that is missing as well. And so for a leader, you have to bend over backward almost to narrate, to give the color commentary and the background on some of that stuff that fills in those gaps. So for the remote employees or the hybrid employees, you might even have to have more check marks on your list to balance things.
Oh, absolutely. All right. So AI, here we are. Can't get away from it. It's here. It's here to stay. We don't even know of the potential for enormous rewards, but also risks. Bring this into the conversation about career development. How do we address AI now?
Yeah, technology is such a beautiful thing. I mean, it just brings so many benefits to our lives. And for a leader who may be uncomfortable or maybe introverted or something, it is going to be so tempting to relegate development over to the technology. And the truth is, as wonderful as AI is, it is no match for what we refer to as HI, the human interactions. At the end of the day, AI can do all sorts of supplemental things, but it can't make you feel valued. It can't make you feel respected. It can't make you feel invested in. And that's what the human interaction does. And so as leaders, I think our challenge is, how do we tap, the technology that's around us, use it, make it work for us, but keep the humanity in the forefront? Because that's what employees crave. When I talk to employees, and this is across the generational divide. I mean, sometimes, we think that maybe it's more in the newer entrants to the workforce. People of all ages, they want to feel like they matter. Like they make a difference, like the organization and their leader cares about them. And that's what leaders can do. Now, all of that said, I feel like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth here, because we decided with this book to actually create a custom ChatGPT, an AI tool that leaders, after reading the book, could use to go help them plan a conversation, rehearse a conversation in advance of doing it with a real employee, get some feedback, brainstorm development activities and that kind of thing. So as a way to harness the technology to elevate the quality of that human interaction.
Love it. Love it. All right, Julie, chapter 6 is one of my favorite chapters. It's called If Not Up, Then What? And by the way, if you're a rock climber, you're going to appreciate this, okay? So in that chapter, you have this climbing wall metaphor, which really disrupts the whole idea of the traditional way that people are promoted. And so, I mean, I want you to kind of unpack that for us. Give us the visual of that climbing wall metaphor in the different directions for career development. Tie it all in for us.
So, I mean, we've all seen climbing walls or images of climbing walls. And as my co-author and I looked at it, it just made so darn much sense. Because on these walls, certainly there are opportunities to move up, but there's so much more opportunity laterally, which is the case in organizations. Making those lateral moves is frequently easier, more available to us than moving up. But the thing about the climbing wall is there's not necessarily a clear path from here to there. For the most part, if you want to get anywhere, you're going up and down and around. You're going backward, which happens in some organizations because you got to retrench over here, get some extra skills, or maybe something is going on in your outside life and you don't have the same energy to put forth toward the challenges. So you kind of retrench there and then you move up and around. And so it was interesting when we started to write about it, I felt like, I don't feel credible. I've never been on a climbing wall. So my co-author and I, we went to a climbing wall, but we did it twice. And so that we could have the visceral experience and really see how does this relate to the workplace. And have you climbed? Have you done that?
I did it once. I'm not a climber either, but I got it once.
Gosh, I mean, the upper body strength that's required. That isn't necessarily required to operate well in the workplace, gratefully. But what I noticed was two things. One is we had one situation where we had belayers, where people had us on a rope and pulley system. So I had somebody at the bottom holding on to me. And when I had that kind of support, I was like Peter Pan. I was reaching for stuff beyond, putting my feet in places that were unstable, but I was willing to risk it because I knew somebody had my back.
Right.
Which so relates to experiences in the workplace, kind of back to what you were talking about with psychological safety. When we know we've got support, we can take chances and grow in ways that we wouldn't otherwise. So that was one really profound insight. But the other one, and this was the thing that I think has stuck with me the most, what I noticed was depending upon without the support of my belayer, where I put my hands and feet, depending upon how I wanted to stretch or not, I could create an experience of challenge, of interest, of growth right where I was without even moving. And that to me is the biggest translation to the workplace. We are always feeling like growth and development needs to look like going somewhere else, up, over, down, somewhere, doing something different. When the truth is the only thing we have full control over in our work is our work, our job, this little envelope. And there is so darn much opportunity for growth in there if we're willing to stretch and pull and challenge ourselves. And so that was, certainly the climbing wall shows all the various directions and ways to get from here to there. But it also, for me, really highlights where you are can be growth as well with intention and deliberate attention.
Yeah. So to paraphrase everything you said, straight up is not the only path for your career development, which is the traditional mindset, right? If you want to move up and grow, you have to go from this position to the one above that. Yeah. And so the climbing wall has many, many options available. It may not even be a promotion involved, right? It could be just stretching yourself in a new area that your manager allows you to expose yourself to, things that might complement your natural strengths or gifts.
Exactly. Or learning a new skill.
Yeah.
Or getting some visibility by attending new meetings or conferences.
Yeah.
The opportunities, literally, they are limited only by the creativity of the manager and the employee working together to find ways to invite the experience of growth into the envelope of the current role.
Yeah. Love it. Okay. So if I'm an employee listening right now and I could be a manager, that's an employee, and and I report to another boss. But if I don't feel like my career development needs are not being met by my current manager, whatever employee you are, what advice would you give that person?
A couple of things. First, don't make any assumptions on the part of what's going on with your manager. I think so frequently we sort of demonize the manager. And the truth is, many leaders, many managers, they have not enjoyed exceptional career development themselves. They don't know what good looks like. They're bumbling around and trying to figure it out. So don't make any assumptions there. Take responsibility for initiating the conversation. Go to your manager and open the door to, I want to grow. And to the extent that you can find a way that offers a win-win outcome to that manager, that can really change the dynamic. So rather than going in a way that could cause that person to become defensive, going in and saying, I want your job. I mean, that might not be the best way to open the door, but to go in and say, I'd really love to learn more about the finances of the operation here. Is there a role I could play maybe in supporting you in our next budgeting round, so that I could get a little bit of visibility? Maybe I could take a little, the grunt work off your plate. Something like that, where you're going in with a win-win association and something that they're really going to walk away with, some real value. When we're constructive like that, I mean, that's hard for a manager. Who's going to say no to that? Yeah, of course.
Yeah. I have a client that allows employees that are gaining new skills to then present in a lunch and learn to their peers and coworkers. What is it that they're learning? And the reason behind it is multifaceted. Yes, it's to communicate and expand the knowledge of the team, but also it's to help that person with their leadership skills in presentation, and delivering a lunch and learn. A lot of employees don't get that opportunity.
That's right. And it really underscores, I frequently talk about the fact that development's a team sport. It doesn't have to be an exclusive relationship between manager and employee. Let's expand the audience. And when people start learning from one another and giving feedback to one another, I mean, we're just elevating the learning and the development culture there.
Yeah. All right, this is kind of an existential question, looking forward, looking ahead to where we're headed. If you had your your psychic glasses on, okay, how do you see the future of career development evolving 5 years from now, 10 years from now?
Yeah. Okay, so when I look into my crystal ball, what I'm seeing, what I anticipate really is maybe less of a focus on pathways and more of a focus on possibilities, because the world is changing really fast. I mean, your listeners know that we're living it day in and day out. Jobs are changing. Industries are changing. There are new roles that are evolving daily. We're getting rid of roles that we don't need anymore. So pathways may not be nimble enough to help people get to where they want to be sustainable, to future-proof our careers. And so looking at what are the possibilities and the opportunities I can cultivate that'll ensure that I have the skills and the knowledge that I need. I think we're also going to see more in the way of development marketplaces. Right now, with the click of a button, you can learn almost anything. You can access, from YouTube or LinkedIn Live or Udemy, whatever. You can learn almost anything. And there's a democratization associated with learning. I think we're going to see more of that in terms of opportunity marketplaces and coaching marketplaces and mentorship marketplaces, where we can go out, and rather than having development pushed on us as employees, we can go out and we can pull in the resources and the opportunities and the needs that we that will complement where we are at any given time. So I think we're going to see a lot more autonomy and self-driven kind of scrappy development.
Yeah. Okay. As we wind down here and go to our traditional closing questions, I want to make sure, is there anything that we didn't cover that you got to get in there now?
I love it. No, this is great. I think you've touched on all of the really high points. Maybe the only thing is, as leaders, it might be worth really looking at the business case for this. We know there's a human case for development. People crave it. But, in your own organization, you might want to scope out what's the business case, because we know there's a direct connection between development, engagement, retention and results. And so in your own organization, getting clear on how you view that can help also to prioritize that.
Okay. All right. We bring it home with 2 questions as we do with every guest. I think I asked you these questions in the last time you were with us. So the first one is the love question, or the love question. I always have to say it now in the manly tone so people don't think, Marcel, love? Come on now. This is a business podcast. All right. So sticking with themes that we've talked about. All right. I'm a leader. I'm a manager. How do I lead with more practical, actionable love and care day in and day out?
To be honest with you, and I don't want to overstate it, but I really think attending to someone's development is the most loving way we interact as leaders with those around us. Development is the most intimate way we connect with employees. We're talking hopes and dreams and goals and fears and aspirations. And so leaders who really prioritize that, who make the time for it, who put their attention toward it, to me, that is love in action.
Well stated. All right, Julie, bring us home. What's that one thing that you'd like us to walk away with?
Development is not a to-do. Development is a to-be. It's a relationship. It's how we show up day in and day out. It's those small moments of intentional attention to somebody's growth that over time build careers and build a legacy for leaders as well.
Fantastic. All right. The book again is called Help Them Grow or Watch Them Go: Career Conversations Organizations Need and Employees Still Want. And Julie, if people want to connect with you, learn more about you, what you do, or even, book you for a keynote, where can they go?
Julie Winkle Giulioni.com. I'm sure that'll be in the show notes because it will.
Very good. Okay, we're going to keep this conversation going in the green room. So this is bonus content that is 100% practical and for leaders to use to take steps, get tools, lay down strategies, and implement some action steps. Okay, so the link to it is in the show notes, or if you're watching on YouTube, it's in the text area right below the video. And we would love for you to join us there. Some of the questions you might hear me ask Julie will be, what practical steps can managers take to integrate meaningful career conversations into their regular interactions with employees, right? So we got to bring this down to the trenches and make it actionable. I'm going to ask Julie, what specific strategies can leaders use to support their teams in remote and hybrid settings? We touched on this a little bit, so that we have an equitable environment and, to address that proximity bias that we talked about. So head on over there and we'll see you in the green room. For Julie, I'm Marcel. Keep loving well. We'll see you next time, folks.
Thank you for listening to the Love in Action podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it, subscribe, and leave us a review. Until next time, don't forget, the future of leadership is love in action. Believe it, practice it, and watch your leadership and business flourish.